Hello, Malcolm here, and thanks for joining me today on the Sunday Sample for Corporate Worship Matters. And today it's episode 110, and we're talking about the topic of, well, the question, what is worship? A very basic question, and we've only got a few minutes, so we can't cover everything. But I think it's very important that now and again we stop and think about what worship is, because if we're going to be effective in leading others in corporate worship, and it's helpful for us to have an accurate definition and a good way of thinking about worship. And today I'd like to stimulate our thinking about worship by, well, I'll tell you by what in just a moment, but a bit of context first. Last week I visited my friend Harry Hardy. It was great to catch up over a cup of tea and talk about old times and some things we've been learning and, well, all kinds of issues for a couple of hours. But one of the things Harry did was he invited me over for a number of reasons, but one of them was that he was clearing out some books, and he knows that I love books, perhaps a little too much, and he wanted to give me a couple of boxfuls of books, see if I'd be interested in them and read them or find a good home for them. And I've got them here in my study. Some I've given away already, some I'm going to keep and read, others I might sell. We'll have to see, some old books. But one of the books he gave me was this one. Let me show you if you're watching the YouTube video. This book called Thou Shalt Worship the Lord Thy God, and it's by Andy Ritchie Jr. and was written, I think I'm right in saying, in the 1950s, published copyright 1969, or so maybe, I think he wrote it through the 50s and into the 60s, but published perhaps in the late 60s. And I've been reading the first chapter or so of it. And in the first chapter, which is called What is Worship, the author, Andy Ritchie, has included a kind of poem, perhaps a prose poem. And I'm going to reproduce all of it in the show notes. So I'm going to read it now. And as I read it, I'd like you to be thinking about what this stimulates in your mind about what worship is. Again, I'm going to put the whole text in the show notes, so you can look at that, or you can read it at the same time as you listen to what I'm saying here. But this is on pages 4 and 5 of the book, and it's a little long, so hang in there with me as I read through it and ask you what strikes you as you listen, and the way that this writing here is describing worship. What strikes you? And by the way, this is not Andy Ritchie's own prose poem. It's quoted by someone called George Walter Fisk in a book called The Recovery of Worship, used from The Congregationalist in October 1928. So this must go back at least to the 1920s. Anyway, here it is. Listen and let me know what you think. What is worship? It is the soul searching for its counterpart. It is the thirsty land crying out for rain. It is a candle in the act of being kindled. It is a drop in quest of the ocean. It is a man listening through a tornado for the small, still voice. It is a voice in the night calling for help. It is a sheep lost in the wilderness, pleading for rescue by the Good Shepherd. It is the same sheep nestling in the arms of the rescuer. It is the prodigal son running to his father. It is a soul standing in awe before the mystery of the universe. It is a poet enthralled by the beauty of a sunrise. It is a workman pausing a moment to listen to a strain of music. It is a hungry heart seeking for love. It is a heart of love consecrating herself to her lover. It is time flowing into eternity. It is my little self engulfed in the universal self. It is a man climbing the altar stairs to God. He who neglects worship neglects that which separates man from the birds, the animals, the insects, the fishes. The unworshipful man is an anthropoid with a highly developed brain. He may be a paragon of morality, but so are bees and ants. He may be keenly intelligent, but so are wolves and foxes. He may provide for his family, but so do hyenas and orangutans. He may be successful in affairs, but so are beavers and muskrats. He may be artistic, but so are birds and butterflies. Worship for men is what song is for a thrush, or physical beauty for a tiger, or speed for a racehorse. Worship lifts men to the next level of experience and justifies their existence as men. Worship is man expressing his entire personality. To neglect worship is to accept low rating as a man. To neglect worship is to fail in life's highest function. The neglect of worship is psychical suicide. Intelligent worship is the most remarkable achievement of which a human being is capable. The primary functions of a church are to supply incentives for worship and to furnish the atmosphere for worship. If one cannot worship in church, the church may be at fault, or the man may be at fault. If the church is at fault, it will eventually perish unless it remedies the condition. If the man is at fault, he will dry up and become a spiritual mummy unless he changes himself. There's some captivating imagery and some interesting ideas in that prose poem. A poem of its time. There's a lot of male-centric language there, of course, but that was common for the 1920s or so. Let's not let that get in the way of the message of the prose poem. So what strikes you from that? When you think about the way that worship is described and expressed here, what stands out to you, and what might you take from that you as a worship leader, and I also, can take to our congregations as a way to help them to understand what worship is really all about, and then collectively to worship acceptably with reverence and awe? Reflect on this. Perhaps pray through it. You could use it as a template for some prayer times. That might be a good way to use it. So let me know if that's helpful and what you learn from it. My question to you today would be, well, two questions really. Firstly, if you had to define worship, perhaps not in a whole poem, but in a line or a sentence, how would you define it? How might you define what worship really is? And secondly, do you have resources that inspire you to think about worship in the way that this prose poem might help us to think in a fresh way about worship? Do you have any resources, any poems, any prayers, any kind of literature or images that help you to think creatively about worship and to engage in it? I'd really be interested in that, so please do let me know. So if you could, please leave a comment wherever you hear or see this recording, and leave that comment publicly in the comment box so that we can all see it and learn from each other, because we learn best when we're learning together in community. I'm sure you know somebody who might find this useful or interesting, so take that link and pass it on, because it's the only way they're going to find it, pretty much, is by you and I passing the link on. If you haven't already done so, hit the notification button, the subscribe buttons on YouTube if that's where you are, so that you'll get to know about the next episodes when they go up. And if you're listening to the podcast, please consider leaving a review. Leave it wherever you can publicly, because it just helps other people to find the podcast as well. Thank you very much for being with me today. Thanks for caring about worship and caring about corporate worship. And I do pray that the next time you gather with all of your friends to worship our great God, that you'll be able to do so with a better understanding of what worship is. I'm going to continue to read this book, Thou Shalt Worship the Lord Thy God, and see what else it may teach me. If you have interesting books that you find useful, then do let me know. Until the next time, take care and God bless.